I love you guys.
Dance off, bro. I have the high ground.
Expecto Patronum!
39 days, 20 people, 1 survivor. Tribe of Nerds.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Tribe of Nerds. Finally, Josh and I are going to sit down to review Batman the Caped Crusader, or at least have a big discussion about this show. Was able to binge it. Unfortunately, Gabe is not with us, had some stuff come up, but the two of us should still have some fun talking about this show. And so, yeah, welcome back, Josh, to talk about DC now.
Yeah! Listen, as Kevin Smith always says, as a long-suffering DC fan, I'm always so excited when there's a good DC project for me to come back to talk about, okay?
Yeah.
Makes me feel good.
Absolutely. And like, I'm not super into DC. Like I've watched, some of the Batman movies and stuff, and like I know like the basics about like the big characters, obviously Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, but like I'm just not as into DC as I am like Marvel, obviously, but I'm definitely willing to learn more from you because you're like the expert on this stuff. So
So I'll just state out loud, Borucki knows that I am a Hugh frickin' Mungus DC guy. Even bigger than that, I have a heavy focus on Batman. Batman has been my favorite superhero since I was a little kid. I'm not kidding, like 12 different Batman Funko Pops, and even more of that when it comes to statues and art. I adore Batman with my entire freaking heart. I have Batmobiles all around my house. I wish I had a Batmobile. I would drive it around town with the windows down, music blowing, and I would not care. But huge DC guy, huge Batman fan. And this show actually kind of flew under my radar for a little bit. I thought it wasn't going to come out for a little bit longer. And then I finally saw like an article pop up like, oh, it's going to come out in like 2 weeks. I was like, what? And then I had to borrow my mom's Amazon Prime because I do not have Prime. And I said, hey, like, can I borrow this real quick? I just want to watch Batman. I'm not going to order nothing. I have my own Amazon. And she went, yeah, go for it. So I log in, I binge this whole show, and I immediately log out. And I loved it. As a Batman fan, kind of like, we'll do a brief overview kind of real quick. So This Batman show for the Caped Crusader is more of like a detective neo-noir type, and a lot of the characters have very close looks to their original comic counterpart, especially regarding Catwoman and Clayface.
okay, yeah.
They look almost identical, if not identical, to what their original costumes were. And they look phenomenal. Penguin, obviously the costume is the same, gender is different. Didn't bother me much. Still a murderous psychopath.
Yeah.
A greedy murderous psychopath. That's the Penguin. So male or female works for me. And I will. So it's detective neo-noir. Batman is going through, and it's kind of set up in a similar, it's almost like a villain of the week where there's a villain per episode, and it's how Batman's taking down these villains. Very similar to a lot of other Batman shows. That's just kind of what he does. And this one has a couple of villains that aren't showcased a lot. So I know that we had like Onomatopoeia, not showcased a lot in the main media for being like a Batman villain. We had Natalia Knight show up. Not too much of like a lot of these are kind of like backseat characters, or at least like BC tier villains. With like the Catwoman and the Two-Face and Harley Quinn, who looks a little bit different. But not bad. I actually really liked the costume when it first showed up on screen.
Mhm.
But Two-Face, Catwoman, Clayface, those are kind of the higher tier Batman villains. But this show is kind of half and half on whether it gave you like, oh, hey, here's the big Batman villain, or like, hey, here's a smaller one that you might not know about, but they're going to cause trouble and Batman's going to stop them. And like Gentleman Ghost is probably the biggest example. I was aware of Gentleman Ghost. The look is awesome. And some people, I myself included, will say I'm not too much of a fan. I'm always a fan of Batman. I'll preface with
Mhm.
that. But I more like, or the stories that I tend to favor are the ones where Batman's kind of fighting like that street level crime.
Right.
So like you have like your gangsters and like some of those criminals that just kind of get the goons and let's rob the bank and the bat. So I love that kind of when Gentleman Ghost came in, it was a nice surprise, or even Natalia Knight, because that's where it brings in some more of like magic elements or some of
Mhm.
like the supernatural. And I'm interested in it. I'm not going to say I don't like it because I would be lying. I did like it. But I will say that the stronger episodes for me in this one are the ones where he's doing the detective work and like solving a street level crime.
Yes.
And because that's just who Batman is. And I think that to general audiences, that's who they know Batman as. The 2022 Robert Pattinson Batman, huge detective. Ben Affleck Batman had a little detective, but not a lot. Christian Bale Batman was a detective. Michael Keaton pretty much was just punching people in the face for 2.5 hours in
And
his
saying, "Do you
movie.
want to get you want to get nuts? I can get nuts."
Yeah, I think it was in the second one too. You see him like using like a mixer and he like
Yeah.
mixes a CD and he manipulates the penguin's voice to say
Mhm.
something. So I will say that Batman influenced an election in that movie, which was insane. That
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
crazy watching that. I'm like, whoa, Batman, this is kind of crazy, bro. But it's nice to get a lot more of the detective side of Batman. And this show heavily delivers on that while also taking place in that like 1940s setting.
Mhm.
And I shouldn't be surprised because the producers on this show are heavy hitters. I know that Matt Reeves was one of the producers.
Yep.
Bruce Timm wrote it, who Bruce Timm also worked on Batman the Animated Series. That's
Okay.
how I knew this show was going to cook.
Mhm.
And another one of the producers I saw, J.J. Abrams.
Mhm.
So J.J. Abrams was a producer on this show, and I have not seen his name since Star Wars Episode 9. So
Yep.
I got kind of nervous when that popped up. I was like, uh-oh, like, whoa, we're about to see Bruce Palpatine in this show. But it's oh yeah, overall that's the kind of format. Really good show. I was a huge fan, and I can't wait for season 2. I Yeah, I'll talk about my specific favorite shot at the end.
Okay. Yeah,
You can
for
probably guess
me
what it is, but I
but like for me, I had like immediately like I think the first 3 episodes I messaged you and Gabe and it was like, this is some really good stuff in it, like the first few episodes even. And then like as it went on, like I was still enjoying it, but then there was stuff like you said, the Gentleman Ghost was not exactly an episode I wasn't necessarily fond of because I'm used to seeing Batman, as you said, beat up street level villains. And so it's just like, I never thought I'd see Batman and Alfred fighting a ghost. Like it's
well, you
so
got it, Baruki.
yeah.
You didn't know you wanted it, but they gave it to you anyway.
Yeah, so that was something to watch. But like it was just interesting. Like I liked the villain of the week aspect as it went on, but then I'm like, okay, when is this gonna like connect at the end? Like almost every finale of a TV series ends up culminating into some arc by the end of the show. And then the end of episode 8 comes around and all of a sudden someone comes in and throws acid on Harvey Dent's face and I'm just like, okay, they're doing Two-Face now. Like that's what this has been building up to. And so I was very happy with that. And from a storytelling perspective, some of the other villains of the week that I liked, I mean, I liked the Harley Quinn stuff. I thought it was interesting the fact like that she uses her job to basically mentally manipulate these grown men into like being babies and like
And she was
kings.
like kidnapping them.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just like very, very odd, but like I from a Harley Quinn perspective, I can see why they would go that direction with her. So it was an interesting watch. There was some really good stuff in it. I wasn't bothered by the whole Penguin being a female either, because again, still a psychopath. She literally takes one of her sons and just literally sends him to a coffin at the bottom of the ocean. So like or like
I
the
think
river or whatever.
she did her other. I can't remember. I should have looked at this. I can't remember if her other son dies, but yeah, she killed one of her sons, and then if she didn't kill him, she attempted to
Yeah.
kill her other son. So literally within a span of like 2 days, she tried to murder. Well, she murdered one, and then tried to murder her other child as well. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that is some cold-hearted stuff. Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have two kids. She murdered one, and then she's like, "Oh wait, the other one did it. Okay, let's kill him." And I'm like, "Wait a minute." Like, there was no grief for the first son. She just moved right on.
Yep,
And
yep.
I was like, "Yeah, this is Penguin." Like Penguin literally stops at nothing to get what they want. So like for this one, that's what she did. Like she had a vision for what she wanted, and if anybody attempted to get in the way of that, she took them out. Or she started cutting down the business like how she did with the mob boss in this show.
Yeah.
She literally, hey, I am like, because she was shooting the warehouses and blowing up the warehouses of her competition because she wanted to be in control. So it fit the bill for personality wise, fit the bill for Penguin 100%, because greedy, they were stealing money from the police ball or the police like retirement fund, and stopped at nothing to make sure that her plan went through, even legitimately shooting down the police station for Gotham.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
you see how deep the pockets go, because you see that like two of the GCPD's detectives were in the pocket of the crime bosses too.
Yes. Yeah.
So like
Throughout
they
the
were
show,
they were doing the bidding for a couple different people, and like whoever pretty much gave them the most money was getting their loyalty. And I thought it was super interesting, and also very interesting how Batman handles that, which is pretty much just by breaking their jaws every time he sees them.
Yeah.
Like they'll show up and be like, "Oh, it's Batman," and he will wail on them. And it's a lot of people try to argue like Batman's a cop. Batman is not a cop. He beats up cops all the time if they're bad, or if they're like going to accidentally murder innocents. A perfect example of that is the Christian Bale Batman.
Yep.
When he's beating up all the cops at the end to say like, "Hey, no, they're the hostages," but they don't really listen at first. And then the cops find out, and Batman's like, "Okay, I'm done beating up the cops. They know now." But it's Batman's more of like an act now, and they'll figure it out as we're going along. But it's Penguin was awesome. She was very persuasive too. And like she was just like, "Oh yeah," blah, blah. And you could just tell she was slimy from the minute you saw her. And but some of the jokes were funny too. I think she makes a joke about Harvey Bullock, and and he was like, "Hey, why don't you come my way, Penguin?" And she goes, "Not if you were the last cop on the force, Bullock." And I was like, "Oh my gosh," like that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That. The Bullock and I can't remember the other detective's name.
I believe it was Bullock and Flask.
Yes, Bullock and Flask. Yeah, I really thought their storyline was interesting as well, being like that they were just these dirty cops that were just like, going in it for the money, and like they were gonna like break the rules and do all this stuff. It was really interesting, especially like that where we kind of like find out where they break Firebug out of jail, and then like but then they have no problem like disposing of him when they need to, and then they like fake that they got attacked, so Bullock punches Flask in the face like so that he has like a visible bruise on his face, and like there's some interesting stuff in there. and then like it culminates, we'll talk about later in like the finale where like the end of it and how Batman deals with it, like Flask at the very end of the show. So
Yeah, which was wizard.
yeah.
That was crazy.
Yeah. Yep. What else do we want to move on to next? Like, do we want to talk about like the Harley Quinn stuff more, or like any of the other bad guys?
I think the second episode was Clayface. So
Clayface. Yeah,
we can
just go
talk
through.
about Clayface because I really, really liked this episode. Because Clayface looks very similar to what they looked like when they first debuted for Batman.
Okay.
And they gave off more of like a serial killer vibe.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what this felt like when you saw them walking around. And it's you just get this feeling. And even when they kind of play around with the fact that like Clayface knows how to manipulate his face already. So they even like, oh, Basil Carlo's fine. Oh, this person's fine. But really, it's Basil Carlo acting as these people. And it was super interesting. I thought the kind of like love triangle aspect was a very interesting one too. Like he was kind of chasing after her, and the fact that she didn't want him really just kind of drove him to the edge. And you know, after someone is deformed like this and their face melts and they can morph into other people, yeah, I kind of get it. Like it's your psychology isn't going to be the greatest, so you're going to make some mistakes and you'll probably go crazy.
Yeah.
But I really liked this episode a lot because it kind of showed like we have to remember Basil Carlo, trained actor, so they almost like talk all the cops out of it. They almost like swindle their way out of everything. And then Batman and Detective Montoya kind of piece it together in their own manner. And then they're able to kind of run in and make sure that Basil Carlo doesn't get away with anything. But like the one thing I also like is that in this show, it's kind of like if they took Batman the animated series and made it modern and finally allowed for people to die.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously Batman the animated series, it was at a time where like, oh, you can't show death on TV. And this show shows a ton of death. Doesn't necessarily show like gore or a lot of blood or anything like that, but it does show a lot of death. One of those being when Basil Carlo kills one of the producers on the movie. And that's kind of when I was like, oh, we're gonna show some messed up stuff in this show. And I was a huge fan of this episode. It looked really good. The story was good. Batman fighting Clayface was cool. And like the whole kind of finale of that episode, I was a big fan of. Clayface is in my opinion, I know that he gets a little bit of love sometimes. There's a couple of different Clayfaces. But Basil Carlo is like the Clayface in my mind. I know there's like Matt Gargan. No, that's the Scorpion. Matt
Gargan.
I almost said Matt Gargan, and I'm like, that's the Scorpion. That's not his name. But there is another Clayface that I know that there's another Clayface, and I always forget his name. Hagen, that's what it is. It's Matt Hagen. That's why I got confused because it's so close to Matt Gargan. But yeah, so there's a Matt Hagen, but my favorite Clayface is always Basil Carlo because he's the famous trained actor. So for that one, this was perfect for me. It used my favorite Clayface. I liked how instead of the big clay monster, it was like a cloaked, shadowy figure with the mask on, so you could like only see the eyes peeking out. And it's like one of the eyes was normal, and then the other one was like all messed up and gross. And I liked it. It worked for me really, really well. And I can't wait. God, it was so good. But yeah, I love this episode. It's probably my second favorite episode of the entire season.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I think this was probably my favorite of the first three. And like the only experience I had with Clayface is the first Lego Batman video game. So
Yeah, that's where you need to play Arkham City. Because
okay.
I won't spoil it, but Clayface does show up at a point in that game.
Mhm.
And at first, he is dressed like another character. He morphed to look like someone else. And then he's introduced as Clayface, and he turns into like the giant clay monster that's turning his arm into like a giant axe and like
Mhm.
swinging it across the room. And it's really cool. Clayface is highly underrated. Um, I wish they would use him in like more movies because obviously he can morph his face. He's kind of like a shapeshifter, so it's really cool. One of my favorite Clayface stories, if you haven't seen it, is actually in um, the Batman, the animated show from like 2004, the one with that creepy theme that I love so much, where it's like the Batman, and oh my gosh, it's so good. But they have a really good Clayface story in that show, and it's not even Basil Carlo, it's Ethan Bennett, a detective that accidentally becomes Clayface
Mhm.
because he's like poisoned by the Joker, and it's phenomenal. Highly recommend watching it if you haven't seen it yet. But so yeah, I wouldn't say a huge fan, but I am a fan of Clayface. So seeing him in this show, I was kind of excited because Clayface doesn't always have to be a gigantic monster, and he can be cool whenever he's on screen because he's just, hey, I can shapeshift and make Batman think I'm someone else. And now it's like the whole point of this show was also every time Batman fights a villain, he like learns from it and he learns how to do certain things. So, and then he's like, oh, I did this last time. I can do this again. And so like for when he's fighting Clayface or when he fought like some other villains that we'll talk about, he learns from it. And you see that he kind of gets better and better as the show goes on, but he still makes some dumb mistakes because one of my favorite aspects of this show is he's like a second year Batman. Like
Mhm.
he's not been doing this for a long time. He's very new to the scene, kind of like in The Batman. But a
Mhm.
lot of the like or Batman Year One, very good comic book. A lot of these Batman stories that people love so much are an early Batman because it's not like Kevin Conroy Batman where he's like, I know what I'm doing by now. Like
Right.
villains walking up behind me, throw the arm up and punch him in the face and he falls down. No, this is like I'm not good at sensing my surroundings yet, so I'm not picking everything up. Or like he starts losing a fight, and then that's when he has to like lock in and be like, I really need to focus if I'm going to win this. And some of these episodes, Batman doesn't even win the fight. He just like gets out of it by like pure luck. And that's something where it's like, hey, this is how Batman learns, and this is how it becomes a better Batman, and this is how it becomes like the Dark Knight instead of like, oh, it's the Bat. We don't know who he is, and he's not a people person yet. But that's what's so good about this show and these first beginner episodes is they show him learning a little bit, and I thought it was super nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this take on Batman. I think doing something different while still being recognizable is a good thing. Um Episode 3, was that the Catwoman episode?
Yes, I do believe so.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was episode 3 or 4. So, yeah, you said this is like the original comic design of Catwoman.
Yes, this is like she looks, I believe, exactly like what she did in her first ever Catwoman suit.
Okay.
Um, because yeah, that suit. Yep, I have my computer up next to me too, so I just Googled it. This suit is legitimately right on the money for what her suit looked like when she first debuted. Has like the greenish cape with the purple dress, has the slit in the front, so it's kind of open and free flowing. I really liked this Catwoman because I liked that she was a spoiled brat.
Hmm.
It was almost the opposite of Batman because like Batman has his parents' money and he's using it to like better the city.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, Catwoman is using this money to like just squander around and steal stuff and get more things because they're so materialistic. And like Batman's buying stuff, but he's doing it to help the city. Catwoman's like, oh, I don't care about all that. I just want to get more stuff for myself. And so that materialistic side came out, and it was really nice. It was the fact that, like, she didn't try to like kill anybody, or because usually Catwoman, she's not out to like kill the bat or kill innocent people. She's normally like, I just want to rob banks. I just want to get money to get myself by or help get someone that she's taken care of by. Probably my favorite part of this episode is the ending where she's in jail and she finally got caught, because I liked how like they were catching her, but also they didn't have any evidence. So, and then, oh, sorry, we got to let you go. So it was really smart that they had Batman like, he goes up to that photographer. I need you to take pictures of me fighting the Catwoman. And he's like, what? Like, hey, huh? And so he just gets pictures of Batman fighting Catwoman. And then that's how Batman gets her arrested is, hey, I fought her and she was trying to rob the bank. And then he has the pictures like anonymously sent to the police department, and then they have their evidence. And then she calls the butler and says, hey, I need you to come bail me out. And the butler says, no, I'm taking all your money and I'm going on a cruise.
Yeah.
Catwoman's like, are you for real? So I thought it was ultimately really funny that she had all this money and then she got robbed at the end. And now she has nothing. So now she's going to start over again. And that's where I know that we'll see more of Catwoman, because now instead of like, oh, I have money, I just do it for fun. Now it's like, oh, I actually will need to rob banks to like be able to survive and live, which she doesn't. She could just get a job. But I know it's like now she's like, but why would I get a job when I could rob banks? So I think that they perfectly set up like, yep, we're going to see Catwoman again, because when she gets out of jail, it's going to be time for her to make some money. And how's she going to make it? The one way she knows how.
Yeah. Yep. Being a thief. Episode 4, that was, oh boy, this was the Firebug. This is the one where they break Firebug out of prison, and the Flask and Bullock, and they ended up disposing of him when they need to, and Bullock gets framed as a hero because like their plan is to even get like the press to spread around that they saved the day. So
yep.
So that was a cool plot line for them. Like I wasn't sure how it was gonna pan out. But like even the fact that like they set up, like I said, they set up that Bullock was gonna make Flask look like he got in the fight with the Firebug and failed, but tried to stop him, and like they let him take the suit, and like so I liked that aspect. It was a cool plot line to have, and then just being like the crooked cops and just being willing to take him out to fulfill their goals.
I definitely agree with you, where I really like the setup here, because I love the setup because it goes back to kind of what Batman kind of started being Batman as, is because like there's corruption in Gotham. And like this episode, it's made me so mad because obviously we all as the audience know like Batman's trying to help. These idiots are like, we need to catch Batman because the mayor wants to win re-election, and if he catches Batman, he was hard on crime and people are going to vote for him. And this episode, I also really liked it because it's kind of that first time we get to see Batman's humanity. Because I hate to say it, but for whoever hasn't seen the show, Batman is a tremendous jerk in this show. He is not a nice person. He is a huge jerk, and he treats Alfred like dirt. He treats everyone around him like dirt, and then just expects everybody to do what he wants. So he really is like that spoiled rich kid. And he doesn't even call Alfred Alfred. He calls it Pennyworth.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I swear, I was watching on my TV and I'm like, if you don't say Alfred when you hang up that phone, and I was getting so mad. But the whole setup of like, hey, the mayor needs us to catch Batman. They want to win re-election. How does he do that? Hard on crime. We catch the Batman. And I love how Batman is like, very harshly takes down some of these cops when they're getting in his way of being Batman. And as you said, Flask and Bullock and Flask. Sorry, not I think I'm saying Flask. I mean Flask.
Glass. Okay.
But they get the firebug out of jail and they release him out, and you're like, it's also irritating because Gordon knows what they did, and he's like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
fire you.
Yeah.
And then the mayor calls, and the mayor's like, "Oh, I think those two should be the head of the task force." I'm like, this city is gonna be gone by the end of the week because they just put two of the most crooked cops in
Yeah.
charge of the task force. I was like,
Right.
this is not good for anybody. But I loved the corruption aspect and like them forcing Batman out of hiding and then ultimately covering their tracks
Yep.
by killing Firebug, and then they're praised as heroes. It's brilliant because then, oh, we make the cops look like the heroes again, and then we make Batman look incompetent, and we were like chasing him. But the moment where Gordon sees Batman, like, and he's about to try to arrest him, and Batman's like, "There's another kid in here. I need you to take him." And Gordon's like, "Oh, he's trying to save lives right now. Like he's trying to save these kids from this burning building, and all we're doing is try to kill this guy." And I loved that we finally got to see a little bit of Batman's humanity, because right now we know that Batman is ultimately a good person, but right now he's in that learning phase where he's just a cocky, judgmental, pretty much piece of trash who's really good at fighting and disappearing. And it's just interesting to finally see that piece of humanity, and for Gordon to it finally click at him like, oh, he's ultimately doing this to help people.
Right.
Like this is a good thing, but still I'm gonna have to take you in. And then yep, Batman disappears and we kind of move on from there because the detectives are put on the head of the freaking made me so mad. I was yelling at my this city's gonna be gone. They're gonna destroy it.
Yeah, that was a ridiculous. Gordon, the fact that he's competent too, we were talking about before this of like how they, didn't used to have Gordon be portrayed as this competent commissioner at all, like the old Batman, like the Michael Keaton and Val Kilmer and George Clooney. Like it was just this old white dude that like he was an idiot. Like like the George Clooney Batman and Robin, he's literally just brainwashed, or he has the pheromones released on him by poison ivy, and then he just does nothing like the rest of the movie, I don't think. Like
Yeah.
it's
He
like
disappears a lot. So it's nice when we get a story where Commissioner Gordon gets to participate more
mhm.
and gets to be that competent commissioner that we know him to be, because we
Yeah.
know that he's a smart guy, but sometimes they kind of push him to the sideline like this is Batman's story. I'm like, okay, but the whole point of Batman is that he ultimately has to learn like you can't do this alone, you got to have friends, and that's where Commissioner Gordon, Barbara Gordon, Robin, like all these characters come into play. And I have a very interesting point on Robin to make in a couple episodes.
I think I
But
know what you're heading because I heard the name. I will get
I
there.
know
We'll
that
get
you
there.
know where I'm heading.
Yes,
But
yes.
yeah, so this episode was awesome now. But I think the next episode is the one that I actually kind of liked what they had changed about the character.
Mm. The on Gordon.
The next episode, so like episode 5, because that one's the episode 5 is the I did like it's the Harley Quinn.
Yes, yes. So this is the Harley Quinn episode. We can talk more about her now. As we brought up, I mean, she's literally taken these rich dudes and like brainwashing them using psychological manipulation because she's a psychiatrist, and so just using that to like make them think that they're psychopaths and dress like babies and kings and all this stuff, which is it was odd, but like it made sense for Harley Quinn as a character. So it was like, okay, this is like creepy, but like that's the point.
I liked it because, granted, I'm not going to get political, but my background for my degree is political science.
Mhm.
And this episode kind of drops in some almost like villainous activism,
Mhm.
because if like some people didn't catch this. I don't know how. They literally say it in plain spoken English, but they literally say, like, hey, the only people she are brainwashing, which I love how King Tut was in this, because that makes so much sense. But and if some people might not know, King Tut, very famous character during like the age where Adam West was Batman, and he was brought into the TV show. He fought Adam West Batman a lot. Pretty funny. His episodes are pretty funny. I don't hate the character at all. I'm actually a huge fan of the Adam West Batman era. That's probably, other than me liking Ben Affleck as Batman, that's my hottest take that I have, that I enjoy a show, I guess. So King Tut shows up, but they leave a hint and they flat out say it, like, these are all the most rich and powerful men in Gotham. So they're kind of like your Bruce Waynes, where they own the company. And the reason that she's doing it is because when they come in, and a lot of them are complaining about their workers.
Yeah.
And especially the one that we watch her take over, he's complaining, like, why can't they just do more work for less money? Which was the funniest way to have him word it. Like, just that flat out, I want to make more money trope. And it's which is real. That happens in real life. But I just thought it was super funny because she's like, you're a baby and now you're going to act like a baby. And I was like, wow, this is getting crazy.
Yeah.
It was weird, but I didn't hate it. I actually kind of liked the change. Obviously, it's a little different from what we usually see in Harley Quinn, with like the Stockholm syndrome, gets beaten up by her boyfriend all the time character archetype. But also, I am not writing it off that that's not ultimately who we make it to. Because just saying that Harley Quinn starts as a different iteration doesn't mean that she won't transform into the one that we know. Because, you know, obviously, one of my favorite things about this show is that the Joker is not one of the villains of the week in this first season.
Yeah.
They leave him out for now. And I love that idea. There's like 900 different Jokers. I love the Joker. Let's get some other characters back real quick. Let's get some Mr. Freezes, and let's get more like exactly. Let's get some more of those characters where it's like, hey, we don't get to always see them, but like, let's bring them out of the woodworks a little bit. Let's get that Mr. Freeze. Let's bring in like some of those other characters that get left out a lot. At least in the media. In comic books, they're pretty good. But yeah, this one, I really liked how they changed it. And I didn't hate it, but also I was like, hey, this might just be the beginning for Harley. And she might, maybe later on in the show, she runs into the Joker, and the Joker appreciates her work. She appreciates that the Joker appreciates her work. And that's where we turn into the Harley Quinn that we know. Or they might keep her on the track that she is. And I would not be angry about that. Whichever happens, I'll be totally fine with. I trust Bruce Timm a crazy amount for someone that I've never met in my life. I'd be like, yeah, I'll give him my routing number. But it's just, I love his writing. Obviously, Batman animated series, one of my favorite shows of all time. Rest in peace, Kevin Conroy. And yeah, I loved that show, and I think that this Harley is different. So I understand why people are upset, because maybe it's different from the Harley Quinn that they know and love. And that's, you know, sometimes they do different iterations of a character. Not everyone vibes with it. It's a little bit different. So, you know, sometimes it's not going to hit for everybody. But ultimately, it worked for me. I know that it worked for me. I was okay with it. I was a fan. That's what I got.
Yeah. No, I there was some enjoyable stuff in here for sure. And I mean, I think we'll talk about it at the end, because don't they tease Joker at the very end finally after not using him? So
yes, they do. They do my favorite thing where they did this in the first Michael Keaton Batman.
Yes, where they make people smile.
If you guys, if other people don't know yet, I have a massive Joker tattoo on my arm. I am a huge fan of the Joker. I wouldn't say I like him more than Batman, because I'm not a psychopath, but I'm a huge fan of the Joker. So seeing, as soon as you see the smile, and honestly, as soon as I heard the laughing, I went, here's where they tease him. Like, because obviously they left him out for a little bit. They're not going to make him like a main villain or the story villain for this season, but they teased like, you will see him, which was nice. It's a nice little tease. I like when they do that. They leave little hints for you, like, oh, so like even in we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it a little bit more later. But even in the circus episode, she says the name Waylon Jones, and I'm like, that's Killer Croc. And like that's and you see him and he like grabs Batman and then they all start beating, well, not Batman, Bruce Wayne, and they all start like beating him up and stuff. And I was like, oh shoot, like that's Killer Croc. And it's nice how they just throw some of these names out, because it's like, hey, we're in the universe, we're just gonna throw these names out. These people are already here. And it really works for me, because as soon as I hear that name, I'm like, it's like that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood where Leonardo DiCaprio's like, like just snaps and points at the screen. That was me while watching this show. I'm like, Mom, it's Killer Croc. But yeah, I really liked how they did that little nod to the Joker at the end. I don't even think I can't remember if he said anything. And if he did, it was very quick. And it wasn't like, it was like one line, maybe like 3 words, but it was mostly just like the laughing. And then you just see this guy like struggling. And it was, it's like they laugh so hard that they struggle to breathe and then they pass away. And it's crazy. That's like the craziest thing that the Joker does. It's not, but that's my favorite thing that the Joker does, because I think it's cool to kind of like, hey, they're going to laugh until they die. And I'm like, let me reword and not say it's cool, because that makes me look like a psychopath. That it's horrifying, but like it's interesting. It works for the Joker because that's what he is. It's kind of like I'm gonna leave riddles at the crime scene. We're like, oh, that's the Riddler. But like for the Joker, it's like, oh, someone's laughing or smiling and like they're deceased. This is probably the work of the Joker. That's what we got.
Well, and it's interesting, Matt Reeves keeps teasing the Joker because he did Barry Keoghan in the Batman, left him as a tease, presumably for the Batman too. But
we'll talk more about that one on another podcast. But I have a very scathing review of the makeup for that Joker.
Yeah, we can talk about it on a different podcast, but
in 2 years when the sequel comes out.
Yeah, in 2 years. Yeah. Or
he'll make a surprise in the Penguin show and we'll freak out. But
all right, episode 6. This is the
Gentleman
Ghost. Yep. This is that episode. Not exactly my favorite thing to see Batman doing is fighting supernatural, although I'll say as a kid, I remember on TV the animated Batman series, I think I watched it on TV. It was one where he fought Dracula.
Yep that's the one. Batman, where they do the Batman.
Okay, yeah.
And that's the one where they do the Clayface story too. That Batman, very underrated. That is a phenomenal show.
Yeah, for Supernatural, that's probably my favorite Supernatural one, was him just fighting Dracula in that like TV movie. It was like,
fun fact, in that show and in that movie, the voice of SpongeBob plays the Penguin.
Oh, Tom Kenny?
Yep. Tom Kenny plays the Penguin in that show, and it's phenomenal because he does like this. And it's almost like the original Burgess Meredith in the like I keep pointing over here because I have a picture of Catwoman, Riddler, Joker, and the Penguin from the 1960s Batman. So every time I mention that show, I have to remember I'm pointing to a picture no one can see. And I'm like, oh yeah, them. And I'm like, they can't see that. But Burgess Meredith as the Penguin, when he would like do the Penguin stuff, and Tom Kenny almost perfectly matches that energy in that show. He's awesome. But yeah, that's very good show and nice reference for the supernatural with like the Dracula, and that's hilarious because I was introduced to like the Batman magic also with that. but it was expanded on because when I would get home, I would turn on Cartoon Network, and there was this show that was out called Batman: The Brave and the Bold.
Mhm.
It's like my second or third, it jumps back and forth, favorite Batman show of all time. The voice of Harvey Dent in this show, Diedrich Bader, voiced Batman in
Oh.
Batman: The Brave and the Bold. So
Oh.
I love Diedrich Bader because he was, other than like Kevin Conroy, he was my like childhood Batman, and he's the one who got to utter the famous line, "Batman doesn't eat nachos," and it's still funny. But so Diedrich Bader was Batman in that show, but they showcased a lot of villains. Not all of them were Batman villains either. So like you had your Black Manta, you got like Mongol, you got like so many villains from so many different, like Gorilla Grodd was a huge villain in this show. You got to see Lex Luthor. You got so many villains were showcased. One of them being the Gentleman Ghost.
Okay.
So I was first introduced to that character. So when he showed up in this, I was like, oh, I know who this is. And it was a ghost. And I was like, is this a Gentleman Ghost? Because in that show, I was shown the Gentleman Ghost for the first time. And I thought it was super interesting. And watching Batman fight a literal ghost. That show was a kid's show. So it doesn't have like all the magical elements or like the witchcraft or Batman like we have to burn the will to the house with the blood of a royal. That was not in the kids show, but it was a nice introduction for Gentleman Ghost because he also has like this costume where he literally looks like a Victorian era gentleman with like the little monocle that comes up and it's just floating because he doesn't have a face. So you just see this monocle floating with a top hat on top and like the whole Victorian age. And he looks awesome. His design in that show is perfection. But it really makes me, when I saw this one, it kind of took me back to that. And I was like, man, I never thought that, like, when I watched the show as a kid, hey, I'm going to grow up and it's going to be important again. And it helps me know who this character was. I haven't read a lot of comics with Gentleman Ghost in it, but I knew who they were because of, hilariously, Diedrich Bader is Batman. And then in this show, I got to watch that character interact with Diedrich Bader as Harvey Dent on the train robbery.
Mhm.
And it was super interesting. But I like how they went with him in this show. It was very interesting that they brought in that magical element because I did expect them to stick to mostly the street level crime. But honestly, these like episode 6 and episode 8 are the more like supernatural ones. And
Right.
I enjoyed them more than I thought I would.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't like terrible. It was just very interesting switching from street level to all of a sudden we're going
And it was a
supernatural.
jump too.
Yeah.
Like, because the previous episode, right, Harley Quinn's brainwashing rich people. In this show, they're like, there's a ghost, there's a dead guy, and he's robbing trains. And he's only robbing the poor people is the best part. Harvey Dent's like, take all my money, leave these people alone. He's like, I don't need your money, you bureaucrat. I want this man's. And it's like this homeless guy that only has $1. And he's like, give me your money. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, what? This is the opposite of what normally happens.
It's so odd.
It was so good. I was just cackling. I'm like, you didn't take Harvey Dent's fat stack of political cash, but he took the $5 that this old, like, hobo-looking man had on the train. Okay. Sure, man. Whatever.
All right. All right. Episode 7, so then this is onomatopoeia, right?
Yep, this is my favorite use of action words.
Yes, it was really funny. It was so funny.
because like Batman's throwing all these punches and he's like pow, boom, wham, and like dodging all of them. And I'm like, we got the 60s action words coming out of onomatopoeia right now. And it was so good watching that fight, but also the whole story surrounding the hit on Commissioner Gordon.
Yes, yep.
And then ultimately the twist of the hit actually wasn't on Commissioner Gordon.
It was on
was
Barbara.
on Barbara Gordon.
Yes.
Amazing twist. I did not honestly see it coming. I was like, yeah, he's the commissioner. Of course they want to kill him. As soon as it was Barbara Gordon, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like, you have a disgruntled client. That happens sometimes. I've seen Better Call Saul. But it was just crazy to see that. And I actually really liked that twist. The whole episode of like, hey, we have to hide out. And then like, hey, that cop car, that's not one of us. Like, that's someone else. And it was the villains catching up and they were like shooting at him and stuff. And I really like this episode because it goes back up to like that kind of corruption where like these bad guys are able to very quickly find out where the commissioner's headed or very quickly find out where this person's going. And it's because there was a man on the inside that was guarding Commissioner Gordon and Barbara Gordon. And he was just like, hey, it's nothing personal. They're just paying me a lot of money. And then Commissioner Gordon's ultimately able to shoot him in the hand before he kills Barbara. And then he goes to jail along with Onomatopoeia and all the goons. And I kind of liked it. It was like magic. And then we went back to the street level crime to kind of narrow us out again. And then the next episode, we go right back into magic. But I liked it. It was kind of like, it took us back to that, like, hey, Batman's not just going to start fighting ghosts every day now. Like, this is not going to turn into Batman fights all of John Constantine's villains. But like, now we get to see like, oh, hey, he's going to jump back and forth. It just depends on like who's in town that week.
Yeah, it was reminding me a little bit of like Deadpool, of like just somewhat like a villain. Well, Deadpool's not a villain, but like a character that just won't shut up even while they're fighting, and just like, I don't know.
And Batman's like, I swear, the minute I land a punch on you, I'm gonna throw it 10 times harder than what you're like. Just for mocking me.
It just it was really interesting, the whole the Gordon stuff. It was a really good episode as well. So all right, episode 8. So I think this is where, because I didn't message you and Gabe this, because this was something I was debating on messaging. I'm like, is because they reference one of the kids' names is Dickie or Dick, and I'm like, is this Dick Grayson Robin? I'm like So I thought Robin was going to happen by the end of the show.
So these are actually all based on Robins.
Oh, okay.
All of these characters, I believe, were based on Robins. If not, I know that 2 of them were.
Okay.
So we had Jason, which is Jason Todd.
Yes. Yep.
So all 4 of these kids were based on Robin. So they had Dick Grayson. Carrie is based on, I believe her name's Carrie Kelly. I can't remember the last name, but I just know her by like Carrie. But that's the Robin that fights in The Dark Knight Returns. So Frank Miller's Batman run where he like fights Superman.
Okay.
That is the Robin.
Oh, okay.
That fights. So she fights with him. Obviously, they have Jason Todd, and then they have another way less known Robin in Stephanie Brown. So she is a Robin that's not as well known, still a good Robin, but I think she just kind of gets outshined by the previous 3 that were mentioned. But I'll definitely say that this is going to sound really mean. I am not a fan of Robin in most iterations. My favorite Robin is Damian Wayne. So my favorite Robin was not shown in this episode. I'm not mad about it. I'll get Damian Wayne in the DCU in 2 years. Okay, I'll get over it. But I will say that I love Dick Grayson, but when he grows up as Nightwing. Once we get to Nightwing, I'm a huge fan of Nightwing. Just kind of that Batman, but much friendlier. Like he's just nicer and he's more open and he makes people feel safe instead of like he's hiding in the shadows. And it's like, he doesn't become a copy of Bruce Wayne. He becomes his own hero that's more open and, he makes criminals feel scared, but he doesn't make like people be scared. So he kind of grows off, he branches off from Batman and becomes like better than what he was before. So I do love Dick Grayson. Jason Todd, love the Red Hood. He's probably the funniest Robin, I would argue. He was just amazing fighter too. It's interesting that they went with Stephanie Brown. Not mad about it at all. But I'm interested to when in this show, which I love how it introduced them all as orphans in the orphanage, because it makes the Robin scenario just seem so much more messed up now. Because then in this universe, if Bruce Wayne adopts all of these kids and turns them all into Robins, I don't know what I'll do, but it's gonna be so funny. Like, I'm gonna take these 4 kids home. They get back to the house. You are all going to be trained killing machines by the time we're done. And like, it's so good. It was so funny. Obviously, in this universe, maybe one of them might be Robin, but we don't know who. And it's probably not going to happen for a little bit. Maybe like another season or 2 is my guess before they'll actually go the Robin route.
Yeah.
Maybe even a couple more seasons than that. Depends on what they want to do ultimately. But I was very interested that they put these Robins in here. And honestly, I didn't call it with Dickie or Jason. I just went, okay, these are regular names. As soon as Carrie came on the screen and they said Carrie, and she had that haircut and she had the big glasses, I went, that's Robin. And then I saw the other kids. I'm like, wait a minute, these are all Robin. Like, hold on a second. So I was, obviously, I'm not Batman if the FBI's listening, because I couldn't even piece together that these were all Robins. So I'm not the world's greatest detective, but I was a huge fan as soon as I was able to piece it together, because it's, it's not that I hate Robin. Robin adds so much to the character of Batman, and he makes him more of like a father figure.
Yeah.
And he makes Batman, he or she, all the Robins make Batman better, and they make Batman a better person than what he is like right now at the start of his career. And I liked that in this episode, especially, my favorite moment is a formative one, not just for Batman, but for Carrie as well, because the villain in this episode, it can't be in the sun or she'll die. So the sun starts coming up, and the Carrie is pretty much like, Batman, let's get out of here. She's going to die. Let's go. And Batman's like, no, I'm not leaving her. And Carrie's like, you totally could. Like, she just tried to kill us both. You could totally let her die right here. And Batman does not even think about it for a second. He immediately picks her up, puts his cape over her so she'll be okay, and they take her to the hospital. Yeah. So I really liked that moment, because not only was it good for Batman to kind of showcase, like, no, I care about all life, but it was nice that it's kind of, he already started training this Robin in a sense of like, no, it's not okay to let people get hurt. Like, you need to help wherever you see someone in need. You have to help, which is the Batman lesson, if there is one, for anybody out there who wants to know what lesson is Batman supposed to be teaching. It's not the dark vengeance. It's not the sulking around at 3 a.m. listening to Nirvana. If you like doing that, go for it. You can listen to Heart-Shaped Box at 3 a.m. if you want to. You can listen to Something in a Way. You can listen to whatever you want at 3 a.m. and you can brood. But the ultimate lesson of Batman is, if you see someone in need, you should help. Or if you can help, you should help. That's the lesson. Batman helps people. He is here to protect others, and he is here to preserve life at all costs. That's why Batman doesn't kill. He comes to the brink sometimes, and we'll talk about that in a couple episodes. But he never crosses that line, and the job of Batman is to preserve life at all costs, no ifs, ands, or buts, period. And that is why I love Batman.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just makes him an interesting character more so. Like, and just like one of the most popular of all time. I mean, I was gonna say that to Robin's point, I mean, my favorite Robin, just because I grew up with this one, was the original Teen Titans Robin. Is that supposed to be Dick Grayson or Jason Todd?
So like that one.
Yeah, the original, not Teen Titans Go. We're not gonna talk about that.
Got him. So yeah, that Teen Titans is indeed Dick Grayson.
Okay, that's what I thought, but like, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that one's my
Yeah, you're
favorite.
good.
But like, I think that's also primarily because they did such a good job with like having to be this complex character, his relationship with Slade, and just like that was probably because like it takes someone who you could potentially find as like compared to the other four on the team, the most boring like character, the most just like normal character, and makes him just probably the most complex in the whole
And
team.
he's the leader.
Right, and the leader, exactly.
And it's funny because you're like, wait a minute, he's the leader, and then you look at the Justice League and you're like, well, one of the main three is a guy dressed like a giant bat, so
yeah,
clearly we're okay with this. But yeah, also, on the point of like that's why Batman lasted so long. Yeah, this year is the 85th anniversary of Batman first debuting in the comics, 1939. So yeah, this is the first year. 85 years since Batman first debuted.
That's crazy.
Which is perfect timing for the show to come out. Like 85 years, and we just got a brand new, fresh take. Yeah. And huge fan.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly crazy to just go through like every year when a new adaptation drops of a character, and it's just like, this is the perfect time for this to drop, or just like, I don't know. It's crazy how that works out.
Also, with the villain in this episode, I did want to mention before we hop to the next one, because the next one we're gonna have a blast with. But the next couple. But I know that the thing that it probably hit the most in this episode, because she pushes her brother, and her brother ultimately succumbs to his injuries.
Yeah.
And I thought it was heartbreaking when Batman has to, and you could tell he had a heart, and he wanted to help, because ultimately Batman, a lot of people think like, oh, he just beats up the villains to keep people safe and then he throws them back into jail. That's not what happens. Batman truly wants to rehabilitate these people because he believes that they can be better. He believes that they can go back to being good citizens that are able to help, and he wants to help them get to where they need to be. That's why he helps Mr. Freeze. That's why he's always there for Two-Face. Like he was Two-Face's friend as Bruce Wayne. He was Harvey Dent's friend. So he's there for Two-Face when he gets hurt. And he does all of this stuff because Batman wants to help his villain. So when he has to break the news, he's like, hey, your brother actually passed away. And she's like, no, that's not possible. He's like, I'm sorry. And he's there he kind of consoles her. And then that's when he saves her and he takes her to the hospital. And I think that's where she truly realized, like, oh, like I did a really bad thing. Like, this isn't like, oh, I just needed energy. And this is like, oh, like I murdered now. Like I crossed a line. And I think that's ultimately why she stops fighting. And she just kind of goes with him. That and the sun was coming out. But I think it was important. This episode was very important because it started to shed a light on Batman's humanity, and it showed that he is indeed growing to like care more about the people that he's helping, and not just like, oh, I need to stop the bad guys and then get out of here. He starts, if you look, he starts staying around longer and checking on the people who were hurt after he leaves. And that's like a formative Batman thing of like, that's where we get the images of like him lurking on the gargoyle or him like standing on the building watching what's going on. Because after he does help, he wants to stick around and make sure that everything goes well and make sure that no one passed away or make sure that everything is kind of found by the police. But yeah, this was a very important episode for me. And I am a huge fan. I'm very glad that they made it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the end of the episode has someone coming in and making the political move of throwing acid on Harvey Dent's face and making him Two-Face. And I remember because like the two versions I've seen before this in movies are obviously Tommy Lee Jones version and Aaron Eckhart, right, in The Dark Knight. So yeah, so like Aaron Eckhart's version, like his was like half of his face gets burned, and then they do the acid for Tommy Lee Jones version. So like it was cool to see kind of like a callback to that. And I get isn't that like normally Two-Face's origin is like someone throws acid on him and
Yes, normally that's the origin. I did not, when I was first introduced to Two-Face, it actually didn't happen that way.
okay.
Because I was first introduced to Two-Face, I was really young. I wouldn't pick up comic books until years after this because I'm a kid. But, I had Batman the Animated Series, and in that show, Two-Face is in it. And it's a very interesting take because no one throws acid on him, but he falls on a chase, and then acid like explodes and it hits him, and it messes up his face. But everyone knows that like no matter what interpretation, as soon as the acid hits Harvey's face, it is the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
Like it really just, that it's just going to get worse and worse from there. So as soon as the end of this episode is like, I'm like, uh-oh, like,
Yeah.
here we go.
Yep, here we go.
We're about to start spiraling here because this is not going to end well. So it's very different from the first one I saw, but also is very close to what happens in the comics. I believe usually in the comics, the acid is thrown in a courtroom, like during a trial, it's thrown in his face. But it makes sense that in this one, it was a guy waiting out in the bathroom.
Right.
I think that makes a little bit more logical sense.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hey, I'm just going to wait out. I'm not going to do it in public because then I get caught.
Right.
But like, it was almost like a hit where he's like, hey, you didn't do what we asked.
Right.
Pocket sand. But it was super nice that they like popped out and I'm like, oh, this is very, very close to the comics. And I will say I am a huge fan of the design of this Two-Face because the Two-Face I first had was the Batman the Animated Series. And I'll just say that one does not look as anatomically correct as what a human being would look like if their face was hit by acid, because the whole left side of his face turns blue and it like his hair goes white.
Yeah.
And in this one, Harvey's hair looks a little bit different, but not as like comical with like it's bright white versus black hair.
Yeah.
But his face gets like blue. One of his eyes gets bigger because the skin is dissolved. So you see the entire eyeball and it's like yellow. And then he has like a huge white eyebrow above that, a humongous purplish reddish lip. But yeah, his whole face kind of goes blue. Which for me is a beautiful design for Two-Face. I'm a huge fan of this design. I actually have a Funko Pop. I have a Funko Pop of the Batman the Animated Series Two-Face because I'm a huge fan of it. I want it tattooed as well because I think it looks beautiful. But I was a huge fan in this series of the Two-Face because it's more of like, this is what your face will look like if you're hit with acid. But something that I'm seeing people have a problem with is they actually made a big change with this Two-Face. So he gets scarred on the opposite side that he usually does.
Oh.
So usually Two-Face, it's his left side of the face that gets scarred. In this show, it was his right side.
Okay.
So I did, I'm a huge Two-Face fan. So I did definitely take notice of this because Two-Face, very famous Batman character. So you're definitely going to notice when his scar is on the opposite side.
Well, and left is typically used for evil characters, like that's to symbolize.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. So for this one, it's like, was I mad about it? Did it drive me to the brink of insanity seeing Two-Face have the scar on the opposite side of his face? Not even close. It still works for me. I like the scarring a lot because it basically says like, hey, this is what someone who's deformed would most likely look like. Their
Mhm.
face is droopier, there's scars, but it's not necessarily like as comic booky. They went for more of like what a realistic acid hit would look like.
Mhm.
So I was a huge fan of it. I think it looks really good.
Yeah, I
Especially the teeth that are all messed up and
yeah,
the random holes or like the chunks of skin
yeah,
missing in his face. I thought that was a nice touch too. Because it's Two-Face. He was horribly scarred, and I think this gives the effect of, hey, I was horribly scarred, and his hair does change color on the
yeah,
right side. It changes to like a light gray instead
yeah.
of the black.
I
So
did
I
notice
thought it
that.
was, yeah, I thought it was interesting that they kept like the color. But this one, it's they also switch with a persona that Two-Face kind of has. It got a little more popular in Batman the Animated Series, but everyone still likes him as Two-Face. He turned into what's called the Judge. So he starts seeking like revenge and what he deems as justice.
Hmm.
So that kind of it gave me the vibe of Two-Face in this show because he was more like a judge because he kind of went on to the, hey, I'm going to go get justice for what these people did. But
Hmm.
also, you see that Two-Face peek out when, like, the guy talks crap about him and then he beats him severely in the
Yes.
bar.
Yeah.
Or when he breaks into the mob boss's home and he's like threatening him and his family. And
Yes.
it's like,
Yes.
you see him like he leaped off the edge. He didn't walk off of it. He had a running jump to get off, and it was crazy. So I really liked this interpretation of Two-Face, very close to the comics and what happens. But also this is more where I'm talking about like they showed murder. Like you see Two-Face like pretty much empty a clip on the guy who threw the acid.
Yeah.
He tracks him down, finds the safe house, kills the two bodyguards, and then he empties like an entire gun clip on the guy who actually threw the acid on his face. And I thought that was the perfect, like, this is exactly what Two-Face would do because he wants that revenge for what these people did to him. So I was a huge fan of this episode. And for all the people who are going, oh, well, the scar's on the wrong side of his face. Let me just ask the question real quick. Who the hell cares? His face still got scarred. Let me tell you, if my face was scarred either on the left or the right, I'd be pretty mad on either side.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, the right side's my bad side. We can scar that one. Or like, oh, the left side is. No, I'd be pretty upset if either half of my face got scarred. So I think it works. Um, I'm not sure why the reason they did it, but also that's another thing where they can make a slight change and just
Yeah.
change stuff around. This is an Elseworld story. It doesn't take place on a main continuity. It's a tale that they wanted to tell outside of the regular canon.
Hmm.
Let's have fun with it. Let's do some stuff different. Let's have some cool designs for characters and let's change the story a little bit and have subtle nods here and there. And yep, that's what this episode did. That's what this show has done up to this point, and I love it. Yeah, I was a huge fan. It is always sad watching the Two-Face story because, like, especially seeing the Bruce Wayne side of it, where it's like, it's not just Batman having to fight Two-Face. It's Bruce Wayne like losing a friend pretty much because his friend turns into this other man who doesn't know how to control his rage and who has these voices in his head that like wants him to go like, oh, good or bad, you have to make a choice. And then he finds the coin and he makes the choice that way. But in this show, it's the same thing as what Two-Face usually does. It's a double-headed coin. So he's going to bet heads on whatever he wants to be the outcome, and then it's going to be heads.
Hmm.
Which is my favorite. I love when Two-Face does that because he gives the illusion of choice, and then he's like, "Oh, I was going to win no matter what."
Right.
But it's super interesting.
Yeah, I really was interested in how they did Two-Face here, and like even the fact like soon as he's scarred, like he has one half is now like the evil half and like is basically getting him to do these bad things. And then like the other half is still like he still has his normal good self that is like, no, I can't do that. And like, I liked the way they portrayed it, and then like he still has his good side come through in the end. So So I liked this version, made for a complex character.
Heck yeah.
So, and then the finale, I mean, for me, the main thing is definitely what we were alluding to earlier with like, Batman versus Flass and Bullock, where it seems like he might kill Flass in the end, but he just shoots bullets around him and then like realizes that he almost just, broke his rule for himself and, angrily, throws the gun in the river or, so I really liked this. It's again a strong character point for Batman. So
I also liked it because to me it read a little bit differently when he emptied the clip. I know that it was like he came close to it, but also I figured that like, because Flass has not been scared of the Batman in this show a lot. He's kind of like, he's still cocky. So Batman really takes that final step right before murder to be like, I'm going to make you scared and I'm going to empty this clip around your head. And that'll tell you, that I could have shot you if I wanted to, but I didn't.
Right.
So just know that like, if you cross that line with me, it will be very easy for me to kill you. And like, that's one of the things that I always admire about Batman too. There's a famous quote. This is a character I also really want to see in this show, or just any show or movie ever, because he's phenomenal. You mentioned him already. Deathstroke, Slade Wilson.
Yeah.
Phenomenal character, and he has a very famous quote of saying like Batman could very easily kill Deathstroke if he wanted to. He could very easily kill everyone, but he doesn't. And that's why the villains are able to take advantage of him sometimes, because they know that he won't break that rule. So like even Deathstroke is like, listen, if Batman didn't hold back, I would lose that fight and he could probably kill me. So that's why it's like, especially with a character like Deathstroke, where they're very physical and they full on fight the Batman, fist fight, and they're hand to hand. And it's not just like, oh, Batman's going to dodge your hit and then uppercut you and I'm knocked out. It's like, this is going to be a brawl almost. So that quote of like, Batman could very well kill me if he wanted to, but he holds back, because that's just the kind of man he is. And that's why Slade kind of respects him, but also doesn't respect him at the same time. Because it's like, if you let go, you could be stronger than me, but you're weak because you won't. But he also knows, hey, thank God Batman doesn't, because he would kill me if he stopped. So that's why I loved this scene too, because it kind of brings that to light again. Like Batman could very easily just start killing all of these villains.
Right.
And, some people will argue that like, that's the way he'll actually keep Gotham safe. But no one feels comfortable around a murderer, no matter who they murdered. Like it could have been for the most righteous cause ever. But as soon as you cross that line, that like a certain level of trust is just gone. Like you're a murderer now. You're a criminal, even if you did it for like a noble reason. And it's bad. We all know killing is bad, and people should hold themselves back from doing it. So seeing this Batman like show people and use it as a fear tactic, as he usually does, is really, really nice. But also just kind of watching him grow throughout this show. And even he finally calls him Alfred right before he heads out on his last patrol for like the season. He says like, thanks, Alfred. And he gets in the car and he starts to say Pennyworth, but he stops and corrects it and says Alfred. I was like, thank God. But I really liked how in this show we got a good Batman, but it wasn't like that Kevin Conroy, like this is a noble man who's doing good things. Or like this is a pretty crappy guy who's doing good things. So like, thank God he's on the right side of the law, because if he wasn't, we'd all be screwed. But I think it was very interesting what they went for, where it's like he starts out as a jerk, and then by the end of the show, he's really growing into the Batman that we know, where he is noble and he fights for everybody and he wants to preserve life at any necessary cause. And this show was beautiful. Well done once again for Bruce Timm, the master of writing for Batman. He is phenomenal. The art style, one thing we haven't touched on a lot, the art style for this show phenomenal. I am a very big fan of the art style. It's almost like a more modern toned Batman the Animated Series art style. And I'm not complaining because that show for a very long time changed the game. And it was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. And it still looks beautiful. It's, it's rough in some spots and it's not as clean as modern animation, but it was the 90s. It was very different.
Yeah.
But that show is still beautiful. So when they came into this one, the art style here really works for me. And I think it just looks absolutely phenomenal. And I cannot wait for season 2 of this show. I can't wait to see more villains. I can't wait to see the Joker. I can't wait to see Mr. Freeze. I hope that we get more. You know what? I'm calling it Condiment King season 2. But really, any Batman villain they want to bring back. You want to bring in Crazy Quilt, you go for it. You want to bring in Polka Dot Man, you go for it. Bring some of those lower level villains out and give them an opportunity to shine, because that's always my favorite when they do that. Screw it. Like, bring in all these like Owlman. Let's see it. Bring him in. Have all this stuff happen. And, we already opened up Magic. Have him team up with John Constantine soon. Have, like, the one thing that makes me sad is right now, I know that we're not going to see Batman in the Superman show, and we're not going to see Superman in the Batman show, because I get why they have it, but there's this stupid rule where, like, these characters can't be doing two things at the same time. And they're like, people will get too confused. You're still writing comic books. You're writing comic books I got a comic book right down here that's based off of Batman 1989, like Michael Keaton Batman comic series that's ongoing. And like, there's a Raphael Grampa Batman, like the Gargoyle series. Phenomenal. Number one, the art style is super cool. Highly recommend checking that out. But like, I think that they're underestimating the amount that we want to see of these characters. And like, I think they're playing it safe right now. And it's famously called the Bat Embargo. So if there's a character in one series, that character cannot show up in another series. So in the show, The Batman, the one where he fought Dracula, Robin did not show up for a little bit because Robin was in the Teen Titans at the time.
Okay.
And they couldn't have two Robins at the same time.
That makes sense.
They just didn't have Robin. And then when the Teen Titans ended, Robin showed up in the Batman. So like, when these characters are in one project, they can't be in another. Okay. And it's super annoying, because how are you going to tell me that when in 2026, if I'm correct, we have 2 Batman movies coming out, and they are 2 separate Batmen. I think we're going to have The Brave and the Bold, and we're going to have Robert Pattinson Batman. So we're going to have 2 different Batmen, even if it's 2027. Within 1 year, we're having 2 Batman movies in 2 different universes, played by 2 different actors. But you're going to tell me that they're going to get confused in 2 different TV shows with very different art styles?
That's weird.
Like, listen, I hope we talk about, I'm going to mention a show. I want to talk about this one too. I'm putting it on your radar.
Okay.
My Adventures with Superman.
Okay.
This show has so much heart. And it's kind of like, it gives me the vibes of like this show at the end of the season where like Batman, he has so much heart in it. This show is beautiful. Very well animated as well. I want to see Batman in that show. Or I want to see Superman in this Batman show. Like, I want to see them interact more. I love Batman. I love Batman literally with all of my heart. I would die defending Batman, and I would not have a problem with it. But also, I'm the guy who, like, the animated series, we had that Batman and we had that Superman that they worked together, and they worked so well together. And it was phenomenal, and it was animated well, and they had awesome voice actors. And another thing, this show, phenomenal voice acting, especially by the brand new Batman. He had, I believe his name's Abraham. He had a phenomenal for I am very wrong. It is not Abraham. I don't know where I got that from. It is, hey, it's Hamish. I don't know where I got Abraham. It's Hamish. And I know that like Hamish was phenomenal in this
Mhm.
show, especially coming off of, Kevin Conroy passed away. And the last Kevin Conroy project we got was like a 5-second scene in we had like a 5-second scene of him in the Crisis on Infinite Earths, which
Okay.
was a phenomenal 5 seconds. And then before that, you had the Suicide Squad video game. So you have a good interpretation, and then you have like one of the worst performing video games of all time.
I didn't
So
even know that game came out by now.
that game came out last year, and you probably haven't heard of it because no one's been playing it because
So it's so bad.
it was not great. But in this show, number one, some big names in this show. So Hamish, phenomenal as Batman. Minnie Driver, I know her from, this is going to be weird. I know her because she played Carlotta in the live action Phantom of the Opera movie. So that's where I personally know her from. Diedrich Bader, a former Batman, voiced
Mhm.
Harvey Dent Two-Face. Christina Ricci, the 90s Wednesday Addams, voiced
Oh.
Catwoman in this show.
Oh.
John DiMaggio, also known as Jake the Dog or Bender,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
Detective Bullock.
Okay.
Tom Kenny, a former Penguin, actually plays Firebug. Reed Scott, who I know from the show Veep, and he's hilarious on that show, plays Onomatopoeia. I know that they had like a couple of other cameos, Cedric's in here too. So Rupert Thorne, it says, was played by Cedric Yarbrough, which Cedric is a very good actor. He was also in the show The Boondocks. Renee Montoya was played by Michelle Bonilla. James Arnold Taylor was a Marcus Driver.
He was Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Clone Wars.
Yep, he was Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's been in so much stuff too.
Ratchet and Clank, I think, as well.
And this one, I knew it was his voice. So none other than Spider-Man, Yuri Lowenthal, shows up as one of the detectives in this show. He's actually a detective in this show. So the PS5 or the Sony video game Spider-Man is in the new Batman show.
I didn't know that.
Toby Stephens as the Gentleman Ghost, Dan Donahue as Clayface, Crystal Joy Brown as Barbara Gordon, McKenna Grace was Natalia Knight. But yeah, apparently it doesn't list it. I don't know if this person was actually in the show or not, but it lists Haley Joel Osment was in this show.
Mm.
I can't recall like what character that would be. But it looks like Haley Joel. I'll have to go back and find out. But yeah, Haley Joel Osment, the voice for James Gordon, phenomenal. The voice for Flash was fantastic. Bullock was fantastic. Literally everyone in this show, I could not point out a bad performance.
Yeah, it was.
Everyone brought their A game. Obviously, it's a Batman project, so I hope that you bring your A game because people are particular about their Batman. Superhero, They're pretty much like, give me anything. But Batman, they're like, if you don't give me this one niche thing, I will riot in the streets every night until you change the show. Basically like the Sonic level of like, they bully you into changing the show. Pretty much that. But every single performance in this was phenomenal. And I really, really hope to see a lot of these people come back, especially Hamish, because he was so good as Batman. And especially, I told you that I would bring it up again. My favorite shot in this entire show is when they paid an homage to Batman the Animated Series with Hamish's Batman throwing the Batarang through Rupert Thorne's window and it clips his ear. So it like scratches him, clips his face. Rupert Thorne looks up and you see Batman with the famous lightning strike hit right behind him, and his cape is just kind of like billowing in the shadows while he stands there with this pose, kind of like, I'm still watching you. Like, we're not done yet. I'm coming for you. And it's phenomenal. The best shot in the show. And it was a beautiful homage. As someone who my Batman is and always will be Kevin Conroy with that famous, beautiful, deep voice. Hamish did a very good job, and he kind of embodied the spirit of a learning Batman. And I thought that this show was beautiful, and it was nice to get a good Batman project after Kevin Conroy passed away, because it's kind of, that was our Batman. That was my guy. So I didn't really know. I'm like, I don't know where Batman should go anymore. Cause that's even in the Arkham series, it was Kevin Conroy, and he was always my guy. And that voice, that voice is gone now, and there's no one who can recreate it. Like, Hamish brought his own spin on it, and I really liked it. Roger Craig Smith, the voice of Batman in Arkham Origins, had his own spin, and I liked it. But I don't think that anyone will ever be able to get even close to having that voice that Kevin Conroy did. But that being said, I'm very excited for where this show can go, and I definitely want to see more of this Batman and more of his rogues gallery, especially Crazy Quilt and Condiment King. They need to be the major story villains in season 2. But yeah, big fan of this show, and I really cannot wait to see it continue.
Yeah, it's been fun talking DC with you, Josh. I mean, it's fun to learn some things I don't know much about this side of the nerdy fandom and comic book stuff. So it's always nice to learn stuff from you. And so I think we'll definitely do some more DC stuff and learn more from you. Hopefully Gabe will be able to join us for the next one. And so
well, now we're actually going to have a movie universe that doesn't flop every time a movie comes out. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited for that, starting in December with Creature Commandos, and then the first big release of the DCU, Superman, July 11th, 2025. We're less than a year away from the next Superman movie. And I am very, very excited for it. I am a tremendous fan of David Corenswet, especially from shows like The Politician and Hollywood. He is a phenomenal actor in those shows. And I think that his character in both of those shows actually perfectly prepares him for like a Superman, because in both of these shows, he's like a righteous character who just wants to be a good man, but also like leave an impact on the world. And I was like, that's Superman to the T. Like, that is who Superman is. So I think he's going to crush it. I'm so excited to see what James Gunn has planned. I can't wait until we get our Batman. I just want to know who it is. I know they can't tell me right now, obviously. But the day that whatever actor it is, or whatever day James Gunn decides to drop the news on us, I will be more than happy to see who our next Batman is. And I have already made a pact with myself. I am going to welcome him with open arms, and we are going to wait until the performance comes out, because I was wrong 2 times in a row about Batman actors. I said Ben Affleck was going to be bad. I am personally a huge fan of Ben Affleck's Batman. There were some spots that didn't sit well with me, but ultimately Ben Affleck's awesome. And I think he was a great Batman. The look, perfect. Robert Pattinson is Batman. I kind of doubted it. I knew he was in more than Twilight, but I still didn't really trust it. And I was very wrong. He's phenomenal. I love his Batman. So this time around, I'm just going to shut my fat trap. And as soon as they announce the new Batman, I'm going to say, welcome to the DCU. And I'm going to move on and wait to see the movie, because I've learned from my past that Josh should shut up because I'm not a casting director. So I'm just going to let it happen. And if it's bad afterward, I'll cry afterward and move on with my life. But if it's good, I'll get what I would have paid for.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about what to do next, what to talk about next, and learn more from next. So, with that, that's our review on Batman the Caped Crusader. And anything else, Josh, before we close this one out?
I will say I just wrote an article about some news that came out.
Yeah. Promote yourself.
Promote yourself. Heavily rumored that Kumail Nanjiani is going to be our Booster Gold in the DCU. Booster Gold, if you don't know much about him, he's a loser from the 25th century that steals future alien technology from the museum he's a security guard for and travels back in time to the era of like Batman, Superman, like the golden age of heroes. So he can become a superhero and be famous, and he wants to profit off of being a superhero. So he's kind of a tool, but ultimately, if he sees someone in help, he has the heart that he needs to help them. So he is a hero, but he's also just kind of like that slimy, I still want to make money off of being a hero too. So he has his own merch, and he like makes his own hashtags like, oh, Booster Gold, go tell everyone that I saved you. And he's a fun character. And I think that Kumail Nanjiani had the perfect audition for Booster Gold by playing Kingo in Eternals.
Yeah, I was going to say, he was the best part of Eternals, probably. So
yeah, and it lines right up. I think he'd be a perfect fit. So I wrote an article about it. It also gives a little bit more. It gives pretty much the same summary I just gave on there. But yeah, I wrote about that. Go check out Booster Gold if you haven't. He's in a couple other TV shows. He's super funny. He has a sidekick as well that travels around with him, like a little robot sidekick that is also usually adds to the humor too. But yeah, I've pretty much just started writing a bunch. So Marvel, DC, Star Wars, horror movies. I'm going to be writing about all that nerd news that comes out. So there you go.
Yeah, I've read a few of your articles so far. I'm going to try to read the rest of them because I'm subscribed. So
let me tell you, I've been shoveling them out.
Yeah.
I think it's been like 5 days, and I think I wrote like 7 to 8 articles or something. There was a couple days where I was like, okay, we're sending 3 out today just because I have stuff to talk about.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to finish reading them because I really enjoyed the ones that I've read that you've written. So yeah, definitely go check out Josh's articles. And with that, we got more content coming out. We got another podcast coming out that is going to get recorded today on Transformers. So another superhero type of thing.
Autobots, roll out.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting talking about the first Shia LaBeouf, Michael Bay Transformers movie, which was interesting to rewatch like 17 years later.
Very different from how I remembered it as a child.
Yeah. So yeah, we will see you on that, and we will see you next time for whatever.
I think we should end the podcast, this one, with I think each of us should. I think you should start. I think we should each do our best I'm Batman.
Oh boy. All right. Well, I did King George from Australian Survivor impressions the other day, so this is my next impression. All right. I'm Batman.
There you go. I've been waiting 24 years to say this. So I'm gonna here we go. I'm getting ready over here. I'm Batman.
Yeah, that's great. It's better than I can do it.
That's better than I can do
it. All right. Well, with that, we will see you all next time on the Tribe of Nerds.